This is Anarchast.
Hola amigos, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. We have coming in from Buenos Aires, Joel Bowman, a good old friend of mine, one of my favorite writers, one of my favorite thinkers, really just all-around cool guy. And I've been trying to have him on for quite a while, and we just never crossed paths for whatever reason, but I'm so glad we have him on today. He's started up freemarketcafe.com, which you have to check out. We'll talk about what he's doing there. He used to be a contributor, at least, or maybe even editor at dailyreckoning.com, and that's where he did a lot of great work. And he's just an amazing mind, amazing writer as well. So let's get into, before we get into all that, why don't we ask you, Joel, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, that's a very interesting question, isn't it? I mean, I think the premise of that question is pretty interesting. Thinking that we become or somehow metamorphosize into anarchists or libertarians or voluntarists or whatever you want to call us. I think there's probably a good argument to be made for the fact that it's really a process of reversion. In other words, it's a process of unlearning all of the vile and corrupt lessons that are forced down our throat in government-sponsored institutions of quote-unquote learning. And so perhaps it's more of a process of reverting to our natural state. I mean, I feel like it's unlikely that the human race would have advanced, relatively speaking, to the state that we're in now if we hadn't favored in some way cooperation over coercion and voluntarism over violence. So I think more than becoming an anarchist, I think it's more of just unlearning all of that intellectual excrement that's foisted upon us during our 12 years or more, if you choose to go to college, of state-sponsored indoctrination and propaganda. So yeah, I would say that probably I was always an anarchist, and I'm just in the last maybe 6 or 8 years rediscovering that.
Okay, so was there a period of time where you sort of woke up to the philosophies or ideas of anarchy and really realized the things that you realize today?
I guess if I had to pinpoint a particular time, I think I got a lot of reading done while I was living in Taiwan. This is going back maybe 4 or 5 years. I was writing, as you mentioned, for Agora at the time, and I had a lot of time on my hands during the day just to kind of stand back from the lessons that I'd undergone or been subject to through my formal education, and sort of take a step back, have a look at the world around me, and quickly began to realize, I think, that a lot of those things didn't compute, or there were inconsistencies in the philosophy as it's prescribed. And when you come to start looking around, become a little bit more aware of your surroundings, then I think if you really devote some critical thinking to it, then you really can only end up at a philosophy that is based in freedom and liberty, and I think that's probably the only way forward.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, you do a lot of traveling. I just saw see your Facebook. You were in Africa recently, and you were just talking about Taiwan, and now you're in Buenos Aires. What do you think about travel as a way to sort of wake up to what's going on in the world?
Oh, absolutely. It's I was at a conference speaking for the Oxford Club up in Baltimore recently, and the question was posed to a panel, something along the lines of, what would you tell people that are young people that are entering college age right now? What subjects would you advise them to take and things like that? And my immediate answer was, I think that the enormous amount of money that is dedicated towards a miseducation in college is far better spent getting out and seeing the world. I mean, there are boots on ground lessons available at every street corner in every major city and every tiny little ramshackle rundown town around the world that are probably far more worth your time, and certainly more worth your money. I mean, if you take whatever it is, $100,000 or more in student loans, and forgo that what ultimately ends up being an opportunity cost in formalized tertiary education, and instead dedicate that time and money to investigating some parts of the world and appreciating some new and different cultures in different parts of the world, then I think that's a much, much wiser investment. And I would absolutely advocate that people get out and see the world before they commit themselves to being stuck in a classroom for 4 years. It's I couldn't think of anything worse.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think that you brought up a great point with this opportunity cost in time and money, and I think the time is just as important as a lot of these kids. They're 20 years old or 24 if they have a master's, and they've never done anything yet. That's a ridiculous idea. I think people should. This whole idea of being in school for all these years is crazy, in my opinion. But anyway, so you're.
And you have to unlearn that stuff when you leave anyway. So it's another 4 years worth of drivel that you have to, kind of free your, unshackle your mind from. So, I mean, you may as well get a head start.
Yeah, especially if you go to take economics in any college, you could probably take it the rest of your life to unlearn all that stuff. Like Ben Bernanke still hasn't unlearned it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that these are the people, these over-degreed blowhards that are in positions of power. The Bernankes and now the Yellens, of course, and the various other central bankers around the world. I mean, these people are married to their philosophy because they have so much to lose if it's proven wrong. They have an enormous incentive for denial. In other words, so to get a Bernanke or a Yellen or any of these other Keynesian misfits to reverse course is, it's spitting in the wind. It's just not going to happen. You're going to end up with a mess all over your face.
Yeah, and you're there in Argentina, and I don't know if I forgot her name, Mercedes or something, is the central bank chairman or something there. Is she still? Do you know who the Argentinian central bank person is? Do you remember her name? I think Mercedes
it was
Pont or something.
It was Mercedes Marco del Pont until a few weeks ago when they switched her out for another stooge. And I try not to spend too much of my time, concentrated on the state narrative as we were talking just before the show. There's an enormous amount of negativity that you can wrap yourself up in the world, and I find that people really become doomed to that, or prey to that doom and gloom kind of narrative. But there's so much to be excited about, and there are so many opportunities out there, and there are so many young, innovative individuals, so many young entrepreneurs doing really, really cool things. And that's part of the reason why, along with my colleague Eric Fry, I started Free Market Cafe, because we really wanted to kind of divorce ourselves from that, really negative narrative of the state, and start exploring some of the really cool opportunities that are all around the world right now.
Yeah, and I think Bitcoin would be one of those opportunities. What's your thoughts on Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. I attended a Bitcoin conference just a couple of months ago, actually, down here in Buenos Aires. I was invited to moderate a panel with some pretty big Bitcoin names on. Charlie Shrem, of course, Eric Voorhees, and some other heavy hitters in the Bitcoin space. And I've been writing about Bitcoin for, I think, almost going on 3 years now. I began writing about it and getting involved and buying, luckily, when it was about $3 or $4 per Bitcoin. And as you would expect, you get called a lunatic and a crazy and all this kind of stuff during the nascent stage of really any new experiment. And Bitcoin was no different. I was filing columns and running up the flagpole. All of what I saw were very, very positive aspects and characteristics of Bitcoin. And it's only been in the last, I'd say maybe year or so, that the mainstream press has kind of caught onto that and realized that Bitcoin is not another Beanie Baby, it's not another Pets.com, it's not another Tulip Mania. All of these kind of just intellectually flawed arguments that were promulgated during the infancy of the Bitcoin experiment have over time come to be discredited, and I think now most serious thinkers are very, very excited about what's happening in the Bitcoin space for a huge number of reasons that we can probably go into if we have time.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting, and I think we're still at a very early stage. So many people haven't even heard of it yet, and even the ones that have heard of it just blow it off, like you said, like it's another Beanie Baby or something like that. So I think it's going to be very exciting the next few years in this space. and not just Bitcoin itself, but Bitcoin-related companies, other crypto-related companies. It's going to be fascinating. This is really for anarchists out there. This, you got to grab onto this thing and get involved somehow, because it's like being at the start of the internet. Here being at the start of Bitcoin, and of course Bitcoin ties in so well with our philosophies, because it's a decentralized, it's not controlled by a government, it's very free market currency. So it's exciting times for that. And you're in Argentina, and I've noticed that Bitcoin's really picked up quite a bit in Argentina, probably because of the capital controls and things like that. What's your sense on the ground?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Jeff. As far as your enthusiasm for the next couple of years of Bitcoin and observation that it's really taken off in a big way here in Argentina, and I think that's not really that surprising. I first learned about Bitcoin when I was spending some time down here in Argentina a few years ago, and it was brought to my attention by a kind of you know loose band of spontaneously ordered anarchists that I was hanging around with and whose company I continue to enjoy down here. Um, and it really makes sense when you have a look back at the recent history of monetary madness here in Argentina, with what's come to be called the decennial crisis. They had one in the early '90s, early 2000s, a complete
It's a national
catastrophic.
sport. Every 10 years they destroy
Yeah,
the
I mean,
currency.
yeah, exactly. And here we are at 2014. We're probably overdue for one, and all indications are that another uh, another currency blow up is probably in the not too distant future. But you can understand, given this toxic environment of predominantly Keynesian economic nonsense and the ensuing currency collapses that are a result of that wrong-headed thinking, that people would embrace what effectively is a separation of state and money. And so rather than relying blindly and faithfully and obediently and in utter civility to a cast of counterfeiters at a central agency, a central bank, be it here or in the US or indeed any other country, people have come to embrace a decentralized protocol with no single point of weakness, no Achilles heel, no vector for corruption, and it just makes a lot more sense. I was thinking about this actually as we published an article in Free Market Cafe earlier in the week by Mr. Sean Broderick called Boiling Point, in which he identifies no fewer than 10 emerging market currencies, or call them submerging market currencies, that depreciated by 10% or more against the US dollar. We all know where the US dollar is headed ultimately. So these currencies depreciated 10% against the US dollar during the past 12 months. And unlike, say, the Asian currency crisis of the late 90s, this is a very disparate group of countries all around the world. It's not concentrated on one geographic region. So, whether you look at the Polish zloty or the Hungarian forint, the Indian and Indonesian rupees, respectively, the Thai baht, the Colombian bolivar, and of course the Argentine peso. It's this is a worldwide thing that is a kind of tempest on the horizon for those that are paying attention to the fiat filth on which governments stamp dead presidents. So it's this is something that is going to be very, very interesting, and I think it's the opportunities on the flip side of that are going to reflect themselves in the Bitcoin space. There are just between, I think, Indonesia and India, you're probably looking, throw another couple of countries in there along the way, and you're looking at about 1.5 billion people that rely on the integrity of their respective government currencies. And so this is a non-trivial portion of the world's population, and a large portion of those good people are what we would call the unbanked or the underbanked, who don't have access to, and probably don't want access to, the traditional banking model, but for whom an idea like Bitcoin will offer tremendous appeal. So that's to say nothing of 1 billion people on the continent of Africa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can really see that this is in the words of Victor Hugo, an idea whose time has come. And despite, all the government efforts around the world, and despite all the guns and all the Bernankes and all the rest of the stooges, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to hold back a tide, to hold back this tide.
Yeah, nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. And I think
Absolutely.
for many years, a lot of us anarchists were wondering, and I always got the question, what would happen uh, if the fiat currencies all collapse, which they will. It's baked in the cake, they will collapse. And I always said, I think the free market will come up with a solution. And so when I saw Bitcoin, I was like, oh, they already did. They're so awesome. They actually did it right at the time during the 2008-2009 financial system collapse. So it was like almost like sent from above. Bitcoin was sent from above to, because it was very close to the whole financial system collapsing in 2009. And that's right when Bitcoin came out. It was almost surreal. And really exciting times. Yeah.
Mr. Market delivers. I mean, this is the perfect storm. I mean, it's kind of a poetic irony that the most fertile soil for an idea, for an innovation and a development, and something as dynamic and decentralized as Bitcoin, for it to come along and for it to prosper and grow in the way that it has, with I think around 22,000 businesses around the world now accepting Bitcoin for transactions, and millions of users in dozens, hundreds of countries around the world. It's a kind of poetic irony that that it's really the state that that heaps all that manure onto the economy at large, and provided a space in which Bitcoin will become an extremely attractive alternative to so many of the to so many people who are just fed up, including those in Argentina, who are fed up with these serial crises and the kind of boom bust scenario that central bank inspired miseconomics tends to bring to the fore.
Yeah, totally. And earlier you brought up your rabble rouser, renegade crew of anarchists in Buenos Aires, and I had the pleasure of spending an evening with you guys. And
Yeah.
there's quite a few of you guys down there. And I think we were talking just the other day, and you mentioned pretty much everything here in Buenos Aires is free right now. And I think that would be of interest to people. First of all, that there is quite a few anarchists down there that they might be able to connect to if they come down, and also it might be a great place to go. What's your thoughts about the lifestyle right now in Buenos Aires, and also the opportunities through this crisis?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of really interesting points there. I mean, if you're looking to come down here and weave yourself into the status system that they have, which is massively oppressive and routinely thieves the value of people's currency here, the peso, then you're probably going to have a pretty hard time of it. But if you derive your income from a non-peso denominated source, be it US dollars, be it Bitcoin, be it a very generous boss who has the foresight to pay his employees in gold, then you're going to do pretty well down here. Actually, when you called, I just returned from one of the Las Cuevas, the caves down here, where you basically can exchange dollars for pesos at the unofficial exchange rate, which I think is probably about 50%, give or take, maybe a little bit more, above the government's published official rate of exchange. So just to put that in numbers, it's about 8-to-1 pesos on the official exchange. But because of, as you mentioned before, capital controls, because of the very, very draconian capital controls that are in place here, thanks to la dictadura, Kirchner, then dollars sell at a premium, which makes absolute sense. And Bitcoin, just by the way, sells at the black market rate of currency, not at the official rate. So that just goes to tell you that there's a huge spread between what the government tells us is reality and what the market actually deems to be reality here on the ground. So if you're coming down and you have what for now is considered to be a superior currency, albeit a fiat one, or even better still, if you have Bitcoin, then come down here. You can lead a very, very good lifestyle, and prices are dropping for expats who are able to avail themselves of those transactional advantages. But on the flip side, we have to remember, of course, that it's not all hunky dory for the people here in Buenos Aires and indeed around Argentina who are forced to deal with this massively oppressive governmental apparatus that straps itself onto their industry and to their innovation and to their diligence, and really punishes them for any form of creative thinking and innovative success. So, there are two sides to this coin, and so I just advise people who are thinking about coming down here to pay attention to both of those.
Yeah. What is it about Argentine people that they keep doing this over and over every 10 years to destroy the currency and they don't change anything ever? In actually our little roundtable group of anarchists there, I asked one of the guys who's from Argentina, and he said it's because that in school they just teach like socialism and Keynesianism, but for some reason no one ever figures out that, like, don't they wonder, like, why does our currency collapse every 10 years and others don't all the time?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, as you correctly point out, the education or rather the indoctrination system down here largely favors I mean, I wouldn't even call it socialist. It's outright Marxist philosophical bent, and actually one of the powers that be, one of the higher ups, Axel Kicillof, who was recently promoted by Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner to the Minister of Economics. he doesn't even make any bones about it. I mean, he declares this outright, without even a smile on his face, that he is a Marxist and that he interprets Keynesian economic theory uh, through the cracked, worn, distorted lens of Marxist philosophy. So, this is very, very ingrained in the educational system down here. But I think we have to be careful when we talk about the Argentine people doing this, and as opposed to the Argentine government doing it, because it's really the people down here that are that are victimized by this process. And it's not like they really even pretend that there's some kind of in your interests, or for the greater good and all that kind of stuff down here. It's basically just a gang of thieves that run around and steal everybody's money through the sneaky tax we know as inflation. So it's a terrible situation, and one that is recurring, but again, it's one that turns a lot of people's attention to alternatives, and Bitcoin is one of those alternatives, and it's flourishing down here.
Yeah, I think the internet's changing everything, because before the internet, people really didn't get access to good information. They just didn't have the ability. If they went to school, God forbid, they'd just get taught all these incorrect and crazy ideas that just destroy wealth and ruin things. So hopefully now, we've been into the internet now for 20 years, but most people really didn't get into it until probably the last 10 years with things like Facebook and YouTube. Got a lot of people fully into the internet, so they get access to better information now. So after this next collapse, maybe this will be the last Peso collapse, but I don't want to bet on that one.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't want to bet against Argentine governmental stupidity. That might be I want to have long odds, but yeah, I mean, you raise a really great point. I mean, ideas and information must necessarily precede all human action, and so when we talk about I don't even want to use the word revolution, because I think that connotes a kind of violent uprising. I would like to see more of an evolution in people's thinking and in people's approach to market-based activity, whereby we, rather than meeting the state on their stage, and rather than engaging with them, and rather than validating their ridiculous and thuggish immorality, I would much prefer to see the incredible brain power and the incredible innovative capacity of young, freedom-minded individuals to simply withdraw their consent. And it's only through this kind of bizarre global, call it a political Stockholm syndrome, whereby people become enamored of their captors, that the state is permitted to exist at all. It exists by our permission and and our validation, and it requires that, not the other way around. So if we withdraw consent, and I think information is a very, very important catalyst in that process, then we can hopefully get to a stage where the state is just a kind of laughable mistake that we made in the bawling infancy of our species, and we can get on to the serious stuff of creating value and creating a more peaceful world for our children and for those to come, if not ourselves.
Yeah, I think a lot of anarchists, especially if you've been an anarchist for decades, a lot of them used to sort of be of the bent that we're eventually going to have to fight the government. And I think it's sort of turning now. And I think I saw a great quote that basically said, you can't end a system by changing a system. What you do is you create a new system and you just move beyond that system. And that's exactly what Bitcoin has done. And things like the internet have done. So the internet has moved beyond the government control of information. Bitcoin has moved beyond the government control of money. There's no violence at all involved, which is beautiful. And so it's really a matter of ideas and getting those ideas out there. And the more that people understand what we're talking about, the quicker people will just start to realize that the emperor has no clothes, that these people are not good. They don't. They're not here to take care of us. They do the exact opposite. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out. And of course, we have a dollar vigilante site in Latin America called TDD Latin America. It's just dollar vigilante, so it's just DOLAR instead of DOLLAR, and .com. And so what we're trying to do is get this information out. We also have dollar vigilante in Germany now. We have dollar vigilante in Spain. And we're just trying to get out these ideas, and you're of course doing that at freemarketcafe.com. So, what's your thought on South America as a whole, sort of the Latin culture? Are they catching on at all to these kind of ideas that we've been talking about?
Yeah, very much so. I was having a conversation with a good friend the other day with whom I attended the Mises, a particular Mises conference in Sao Paulo, I think maybe about a year ago or so. And it was very heartening to see that it wasn't full of, stuffy old white guys in suits and tweed jackets and, with entertaining mustaches and such. It was, a very, very meaningful portion of the crowd was made up of a very much younger demographic. A lot of young women are getting involved in the movement, which is of course awesome to see. A lot of young guys. I mean, it's really, I think, as you mentioned, because of the internet and because of that very, very critical and precious spread of information. These ideas are really taking root in a younger demographic, and this is the most energetic demographic out there. I would like to think that eventually they will become the most apolitical demographic out there. Observing, of course, that occupation is for armies, but it's for us to vacate their silly ideals. And there is an encouraging population of younger individuals who are really getting out there and making a change, and it's not at all surprising. I mean, I was reading back a little while ago and noticing that this trend of decentralization and then the counter trend of centralization and coagulation of political power. This is a multi-century trend that tends to ebb and flow through history. So if you and I were talking, right, well, we wouldn't be talking on Skype, but if you and I are having a conversation on the cobbled streets somewhere in old Europe around the turn of the 16th century, the early 1500s, that is, and you said to me, Joel, I think this overarching power structure, which burns people at the stake and puts them on a docking stool for heresy and involves itself in each and every intimate aspect of our lives. This is going to be overthrown when my friend Johannes Johannes Gutenberg comes along with his movable type printing press and starts disseminating information to the masses. I probably would have thought, wow, Jeff, you're a good guy, but that's a pretty big claim. But that's exactly what's happening now. And it's not happening at the speed of the Gutenberg press. It's happening at the speed of the internet. And that's a very, very important tool that we have right now. And I think one that politicians will underestimate ultimately to their own peril.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's exciting times. And if you think about it too, if you just look at the U.S. With the baby boomers, and they went through that whole, a lot of socialism, creating all these laws and all these taxes and all these, but they also had socialist insecurity, and they all depended on that. And they have their Medicare and Medicaid, and that all kind of worked for a little bit of time, which these things tend to do. If there's a lot of wealth in the country, you can kind of jiggle it around and make it kind of work for some people for a period of time. But younger people today, no matter almost where they live, but especially in the Western countries, they don't see anything good from government. They're born and they have $100,000 worth of debt already, and they're like, what? And then they go to these schools. They go to these schools and they're just getting beat up all the time, and forced to go there. And then they get out and they have to pay another $100,000 to get some useless piece of paper for the most part. And they know that socialist insecurity is not going to be there when they retire. So they're like, why am I paying this? There's cops on every corner. Not so much in Argentina, that's a lot better, but in places like the U.S., which is a true police state now, you can't even drink until you're 21 in some places, which is a crazy idea. They're basically treated like prisoners and like slaves. Almost everyone is a slave today if you pay taxes, but they're outwardly treated that way. And so because of that, and also because of the internet, as you mentioned, they see it for what it is, and then they get access to information, real information. They see that there's other ways to do things other than statist ways of doing things. And yeah, there's a whole crop of amazing young people coming out, and I meet them all over the place. And of course, here on Anarchast, we've had so many, and a lot of them now are really young, beautiful girls, and that really is that's going to change a lot, because people like to look at pretty girls, and if these girls are saying some like amazing stuff, you have to listen to it. And so many like Julia Taransky, who was just recently on, Josie the Outlaw. These girls are getting hundreds of thousands of views just right off the bat. And so I'm trying to get as many younger women to get out there on the internet and say these things, because they get way more views than we do. It's just fact of life. And they're also smart too. Like some are incredibly smart. Billy Rock is another one. They're all incredibly smart, incredibly intelligent. And I think that's really going to be the next wave, is these younger people. And they're all over the place. The Students for Liberty is huge. You meet those people and it blows your mind how smart they are and how much energy they have. And so I think this is going to be an incredible evolution, not a revolution, in the next few years due to this catching on now with a new generation.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we have, not we personally, but the mankind or womankind, peoplekind have revolted through the centuries. And the process of revolution is very rarely one that spares innocent lives. It's very rarely one that spares blood on the streets. But it is a process that has been tried and tried again. And by definition of the word, by a revolution, it brings us back to our point of origin all the time. We replace one tyrant with another tyrant with a slightly different opinion, enforcing that opinion with a different gun. And we see this across the Middle East right now, of course, and we see people calling for revolution all the time. But I think people are starting to catch on to the reality that when you do something again and again and again, and you expect different results, then you probably should check yourself into an asylum or seek some kind of help. But what people are coming to realize now, and I think that this is a particularly prevalent philosophy with a younger demographic, is that people can evolve out of the state. We don't have to ask its permission anymore. We don't have to validate its institutions by trying to affect change at the ballot box and all of this kind of nonsense. I mean, this is, this younger generation, I think, and I hope, really starting to realize that permission is not required to live a free life. And the only people that you need to request permission from are those with whom you interact on a contractual basis, on a mutually beneficial contractual basis. And this is the basis for all peaceful transactions. It's the basis for all value-adding transactions. And that is a whole heck of a lot better than, dying as a miserable old individual when you're 75 years old, having spent the last 50 years of your life trying to, quote unquote, throw the bums out, only to realize that that tiny little space inside the inner beltway in Washington, D.C. has nothing but a proliferation of bums. And no matter how often you denigrate one of them or vote one of them out of the office, there are 10 more lined up to replace them. And I think that's actually a pretty apt metaphor for their position on the anatomical position on the body politic and for the kind of shit that spews out of their mouth. So in any case, it's much better to see people vacating, leave the occupation to standing armies. We don't need to meet them on those immoral grounds. We can do something much better with our brains and our intellect and our peaceful exchange of goods, services, and above all, ideas and information.
Yeah, well said. Going round circle a little bit, getting back to travel, I'm sitting here in Acapulco, Mexico, rated the fourth most dangerous city on earth a couple of years ago. You're in Buenos Aires, where a lot of people say, I would never go to Argentina. They have capital controls and it's a horrible government. But we both, I think, live pretty good lives in these places. What would you say to that, to someone, because I hear it all the time and it really bothers me. Like I hear so many people, I say I live in Mexico, and they're like, oh wow, that's very dangerous. So I'm like, what are you talking about? It's way more dangerous than the US.
Yeah.
and beyond that, I'm not getting armed robbed every single year for half my money through income tax because of the lifestyle I live, all legally, living a permanent traveler, prior taxpayer theory lifestyle where I make sure my affairs are in different places so that no one government can own me. And but it's just amazing to me. I've heard it so many times about Argentina because, of course, a good friend of both of ours, Doug Casey, has a place there called Cafayate. Let's dance to the Cafayate. And I hear, and of course I'm involved in something called Gulf Sculpture Chile and probably many more Gulf sculptures in other countries soon. And I just keep hearing, oh, I would never go to Argentina, and I would never go to Mexico. It's like, what would you say to people like that? And also I want to ask you, is your plans to stay in Buenos Aires for an extended period of time? Are you going to stay there as the peso reaches its ultimate intrinsic value?
Yeah, well, a lot to unpack there. First of all, congratulations on your various projects around the world. I met a bunch of people here that were involved in the Gulch, Chile, at the Bitcoin conference in Buenos Aires, and can't speak highly enough about those individuals. And of course, our mutual friend Doug Casey is always fomenting peaceful resistance to the state wherever he goes. And so, yeah, there's lots of really, really good projects going on around the world. And so congratulations on your continued part in them. As for some kind of misinformed reticence to spend any time in a country that the United States government tells you is unsafe, or the Australian government tells you is unsafe, I would really question the authenticity of the author of those words. I mean, what people really, really really grow as individuals, at least in my experience, when they get outside their comfort zone. And so I think the value of travel is something that really can't be overstated, if only to learn more about your origin, if only to compare and contrast the lessons that you learned when you were growing up and the experiences that you had in your formative years with those that are occurring in other familial structures, other cultural structures, other socio-political structures around the world. It really helps to highlight and identify some of the very things that we're talking about. So, yeah, absolutely get out and have a look around. So to the third part, I think it was will I stay in Argentina? I spend about 4 months of the year here in Argentina, and the rest of the time it's kind of sort of bouncing around. Mostly in Europe. Sometimes I go back to Australia to visit family and friends, and I'm in and out of the US um, more than uh, more than I would like to be, given the treatment that I generally get at the TSA. But but yeah, I think probably the best thing to do is to remain nimble and keep your options open. You don't have to plant roots in one particular place and only speak to the six people that are in your street, and go to the same supermarket at the appointed hour every day, and then turn on the idiot box for feeding time during the evening. I mean, there are much richer pursuits to engage in life. And I remember living in spending some time in Dubai a few years ago, and a good friend of mine there, who was an older gentleman. I posed the same question to him, and he was a self-described penthouse gypsy. It was older than me, and had quite a bit of financial security. And he, when I asked him, where is the freest place on earth? This is very late at night, and we'd had a few cocktails and smoked some shisha and whatnot. And he said, look, it's very difficult to pinpoint one particular geographic location where you're going to be left alone and you're going to be able to enjoy all of the freedoms and liberties that you hold dear. So his idea, and I think it's probably a very good one, is to internationalize your lifestyle and to internationalize, your commercial interests, internationalize where you dedicate your time, which is ultimately your most precious resource. And his sort of modus operandi at the time was that he would spend some of his time every year in Dubai, where he was able to enjoy a relative degree of economic freedom, as they don't have income taxes there. It's a freehold zone. But of course, you're not going to get a whole lot of social liberties. You're not going to enjoy a whole lot of social liberties when your wife is forced to dress in a sack. So he would go to other parts of the world where he would enjoy more social liberties, and then he would go to business friendly places for this particular thing that he liked, and other places. So I mean, I really think that it's a fictional Shangri-La that anybody is chasing if they truly think that they're going to find one specific place where they can spend 365 days of the year and enjoy a completely free life. I think internationalizing yourself and being spontaneous, jumping on a plane at the last minute, going to somewhere that you've never been before, going to visit a friend in a far off land that you haven't been to and that you know little about. I think that's probably ultimately on the move where you find the most freedom.
Yeah, I'm constantly amazed at how many people, especially younger people are like 16 or 17 or 18, they understand what we're talking about, and they're very scared, or they say, well, I don't have much money. How could I possibly go somewhere else? And there was a guy who just a few years ago, he went to every single country on earth, I think it's 210 or something like that, and he never used an airplane, and he really didn't have a lot of money, and he was just, catching a lift on a tanker or a cruise ship, or finding a way to hopping on the back of the train, going somewhere. People today, I think it's because of the government, the constant just negative stuff put out on the media, mostly coming from governments saying the world's a dangerous place. I think they try to do that to kind of keep you in your place. And the more that you just get out there, if you're a young person, and I've said this many times, go to a place like Cambodia. You can live on. I know a person there who's sharing an apartment with someone, and it's a $50 a month apartment, so it's $25 a month. It's not the greatest apartment. I don't think they even have hot water, but if you have no money and you're a young person, who cares? It's warm, so you don't need hot water anyway.
Yeah, Cambodia's got a very nice climate. You don't need to take a steam bath every day. You'll be dehydrated. You'll whittle away to a slip of a thing. But you're absolutely correct, Jeff. The person that says, I live in Australia, or I live in England, and or the United States, and I pay £5 for my pint down at the pub in the afternoon, and somehow I have no money. Well, guess what? You're going to have even less money the longer you stay there. I remember traveling throughout, just to choose your recent example, traveling along the Mekong Delta through Cambodia, Thailand, and up into Vietnam around about the time of the 2008 economic hullabaloo, and seeing a lot of people there on the beach that were recently that came to have a lot more time on their hands as of recent months, who were, in other words, made redundant from their positions in the banking sector / cartel in whether it be in the city of London or Midtown Manhattan. And they chose, I think, rather wisely, that they would spend a few months kind of getting themselves together, deciding what their next move was going to be, while sitting on a pristine beach in, you can think of a million places. Nha Trang in Vietnam is a great little scuba diving village. You can go and hang out there. It costs you about $20 a day to get a reasonably good apartment. The longer you spend there, I'm sure you can find $25 a month places in Cambodia. But you're drinking 50-cent Mai Tais on the beach with the sun on your hand and a good book. The sun on your head and a good book in your hand, as opposed to enduring the constant mainstream media saturation, bombarding you with negative stories, and this person was shot by that cop, and this person got pulled away by the IRS, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's just not a way to live. And to add insult to injury, you have to pay an enormous amount of money to live that substandard lifestyle. You're much better on a beach in Vietnam.
Yeah, I've been to Nha Trang, and I actually remember I went to a hotel there, and it was $30 a night. And I like to stay in decent hotels. I'm too old and just not interested in staying in hostels and really crappy places. And I was kind of surprised at the price, and I looked at it on the internet. I said, "This looks pretty good, and how's it only $30 a night?" And I went there, and it was brand new, incredibly modern, flat screen TV. Everything was so nice, and it was $30. And I opened the mini bar, and like a Coca-Cola was like 50 cents. Nothing was over $1 in the mini bar, including alcohol. Beer was like 70 cents or something. And I was like, man, this is what more people need to know about these kind of places. And of course, they're all over the place. And we have another.
It's a great way to spend a few months, drinking 70-cent beers and catching up on all the reading that you wish you had time to do, but weren't able to because you had to work a shitty job to pay back a student loan for an education that you didn't want and now have to liberate yourself from.
Yeah, we actually at Dollar Vigilante, a big part of what I think we're doing is something called TDD groups. And so we have people all around the world who are like-minded like us, libertarian, definitely all libertarian, and very much free-minded, and a lot of them expatriated to other places. And we've got them all over the world. So if you get on there, you can meet people all over the world. I don't know if we have one in Buenos Aires, but if we don't, I'm going to make sure that either you or someone, one of your friends, one of the anarchist group down there starts one up so that people can get access to what you guys are doing down there. But we have one guy who's through TDB groups. He went to a bunch of the groups here in Mexico, and he was working at the new World Trade Center, the new the monument to the death and destruction caused by the U.S. government. He was actually working in the building. He said it was like hell-like conditions, like it was just unbelievably horrible conditions, and he was so unhappy. And of course, you have the weather that we're seeing there now, and he had come down to Mexico for a couple months just to check it out, and stayed with a lot of the groups here. He came here and we met on the beach. Actually, it's Lou Crowley, who was on Anarchast, and you can see that Anarchast interview was a great interview. And he just decided last month, he said, that's it, I'm going to listen to Jeff Berwick, I'm going to take a chance, I'm going to quit my job and just go out there and see what happens. And he found things like workaway.com, which is a website where you can find places around the world where they'll give you free room and board if you work for them. And he's an electrical engineer. So he's actually in Costa Rica right now, and I see him on Facebook. He looks so happy, and he's not making a ton of money, but he's also not, he's living, all his living expenses are paid for, and he's just doing odd jobs for different hotels and meeting incredibly interesting people. So there's so many ways like that people should take advantage of. There's things like couchsurfing.com. The internet has really enabled so many more options, and you can go sleep on someone's couch somewhere for $5 a night, and you can find these people, and they have ratings, so you can see like, oh, this guy raped me, so don't go there, and this guy was incredibly nice, go there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. The amount of opportunities that are out there for people who are willing to. What it ultimately comes down to is people who are willing to vote for themselves, and they don't want to outsource their morality or life's entertainment value to any third party. You have to vote for yourself, and there are, as you mentioned, Jeff, there are a ton of really, really interesting experiences that you can have around the world, and they may not be enriching immediately in a financial sense. But with a wealth of experience, then you certainly position yourself, in a better mindset and a better frame of mind to, for a young person, worry about making a stack of money a little later on when you have connections all around the world. I remember when I first left Australia. I think I was maybe 18 at the time, and I had no money. And at the time, the Australian dollar was a pittance to the British pound. I moved over to England for a little while and kind of, did the working in pubs thing and going from hotel to hotel or hostel to hostel and lived that kind of lifestyle. But I remember saying to my parents when I left, I want to get to 30 years of age and have $0 in the bank. But knowing that I have spent every single spare cent that I have on a plane flight, or saying yes to an opportunity that I might not have had I stayed on the Gold Coast where I grew up. And I fell a little bit short of my goal. I didn't quite have $0 when I turned 30 years old, but I'm glad that I voted for myself and went out and enjoyed those experiences and met a ton of really cool people that taught me a lot. And that's not peculiar to me or to you or to one particular individual. This is available to anybody right now. It's available to anybody who chooses to vote for themselves and to back themselves and to go out and see the world.
Great message, and this video has been quite a bit longer than I normally do, and that's because you're so interesting, and we could talk for hours, but people have ADD nowadays, so we should maybe cut this short and maybe have you back on at some point in the future. So if you'd like, Joel, just tell people about Free Market Cafe or anything else that you're doing.
Yeah, sure. If people are at all interested in what we're talking about, then freemarketcafe.com is the website to go to. You can do all the usual social media stuff with Facebook, and I don't even know if we're on Twitter, but we should probably get on that. But yeah, track us down through all the usual networks, and I think you'll be able to find us somewhere or another. You're a smart person. Go and check it out.
That's great, and hope to see you soon. And so that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, us, love, amor. Amor, love, and anarchy.
This is Anarchast.